Welcome back to the Raisina Fireside Chats. We thank you to the Raisina Dialogues for having us here, and welcome Jeb Nadaner from Washington, D.C. to this exciting topic of how democracies and countries can insulate themselves from future shocks and over-dependence on China when it comes to their supply chains, digitals or otherwise. So, Jeff, without taking much time, let me kick off with that opening thought. How do you think democracies should work together? How long do you think this process is going to be to insulate and to move to, to hedge their bets, which are today probably over-dependent on China when it comes to supply chains?
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you, Arvind, and to be with ORF at Raisina. I think supply chains are beginning to decouple. They won't decouple in full with China, but it'll be a partial decoupling. It'll be depending on what the article is that's made in China, if it's a Barbie doll, or it's a toy, or even if it's a television, it may not be very important. But if it's critical infrastructure that goes into your 5G networks or the batteries for your cars, I think there's going to be some duplication of supply chains. I think this is a multi-generational effort. This will take 20 or 30 years. It will cost quite a bit. And I think depending on what governments do, business will be more or less successful in creating these duplicate supply chains.
And you've just said a very key thing in this, that this is a multi-generation thing. China has overtly or covertly, implicitly or explicitly supported their national technology companies or national companies, as they call them, national companies. They're not going to take this lying down. They're going to, they're going to flex their muscles. They're going to do everything to ensure that the alternates or the duplicates are not found so easily. So what's your thought on that? What's your thought? What's your advice to democracies to how do you manage this a very slippery task of moving and hedging away from China while also maintaining in the interim period a good relationship with China?
Well, this is going to require statecraft. Metternich, Castello had to balance certain forms of power. Our countries will have to do the same thing. This will be very challenging because China will increase subsidies, China will increase theft, China will shut off supplies or slow down supplies to indicate that who's in charge with certain supply chains. So I think we all have to be prepared for a very rocky road, and there'll be even some points of danger.
And that's something that I think all of us have to, as you rightly said, it will require a lot of statecraft, and especially countries which, where China is seeing a threat coming from, will also see a lot of attention from China, if I put it in a mild term. So do you foresee that attention from China to those countries where it foresees a threat in those decoupling of the supply chains?
Yeah, I can see certain countries are going to align with China, may even not want to, but they'll find Chinese blandishments, Chinese terms very attractive. But other countries will have to make a choice. Are they going to be with a democratically aligned system that shares many common values, has a common financial structure? You can see financial structures are beginning to pull apart. When Russia got expelled from the international financial system, it doesn't mean that one can't do business with Russia. It just means it's more difficult. It costs more. One has to barter, more basis points. China's clearly creating its own financial system with certain benefits for those that participate in it. But I think ultimately the democratic system of finance will be more attractive. Now I think, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
You've written a lot about the digital age. What about the hardware that the digital age depends on, and the fact that so much of it is made in China?
Well, Jeb, thank you for that question, because see, India has a very, very balancing act to do, if I may say. China has the highest number of troops on our borders right now. Last 2 years, we've seen a few skirmishes. Things are normalizing, but you know, as we say that, India did take its national interests first in banning over 300 plus Chinese platforms and Chinese technology from India. In the 5G trials, you know, we have shown a lot of intent to not use Chinese equipment. In fact, they have not been given permission. So coming to hardware, and that's where the trickiness is, because you know, as you know, whether it's our ambitions in electric vehicles or it's our ambitions in digital platforms, which are hardware dependent, a lot of chips still come from China. And that's where I think India is playing a very balancing act. While we are doing, I think, a three-pronged strategy to do as much domestic as possible. It's not going to happen overnight. Two, we are, you know, we are working with friendly countries, other democratic countries, to create alternate supply chains, as you rightly said. But a lot of thrust on domestic semiconductor mission, a lot of thrust on domestic manufacturing for the smart components. And a great success has been found in many of those end products. But a lot needs to be done. And in that respect, till we have a lot of dependence, not only on the digital hardware and digital chips on China, you know, we thankfully have good relationships with Taiwan. We have good relationships with many other countries which can supply. But still there is an over-dependence on China. And I think it's work in progress. But there is clearly a strategic intent from the leadership top down that we need to create alternates and slowly migrate away from there.
China has an advantage in capital-intensive industries. And it's been largely done on the backs of its population, because people earn money and can't spend it, and the government can subsidize these industries. And the world found it very convenient to have China make the capital expenditures for these industries, and instead in the US and in India to focus on development of intellectual property, to focus on services. This will take a generation. However, the one strength that we have is the network of countries.
That's
We're talking about it's a vast series of countries with immense capabilities. So starting with India, and if you go all the way to Europe, so we're talking about the US, Mexico, Taiwan, Malaysia, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Europe to Israel, and even countries like the UAE. So that network is going to have to perform over time. And I think one of the key issues are, what do the governments do to incentivize the network that's thread across the world?
See, you know, you bring about a very interesting point, and I think talking about digital, you see, there has been three philosophies while the digital platforms are being built globally. One is what I call the Shenzhen Valley model, which is the Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and the ByteDance, the BB80 companies, and then there has been the platforms coming from Silicon Valley. India has actually created a third platform, which is a public, which is more a digital public goods, called the India Stack or the Health Stack. And the approach India is doing, and is willing to share with the world, and the vaccine platform India just recently created and shared with many countries, is a testimony of what you just said, that India wants to work with democracies, create open platforms, and share that knowledge. And we've seen that alignment happen in a very, very short period of time. Earlier, this would have taken years of diplomacy and talking. But I think the world is recognizing that the alignment and the standardization of many technologies, people need to come together. Countries need not reinvent the wheel, and share technology, share digital open goods, so that the societies get benefit, and countries are working together. I see a lot of future in this whole approach of digital for good and open common technology, open platforms.
So I think one of the things the governments need to do is they need to give some clear incentives to the market that they intend, talking about the friendly governments stretching from India through the US to Europe, say we do have the intent to create an alternative set of global supply chains in key materials. Key materials are things like semiconductors, electronics, network devices, batteries, things like that. And we're going to incentivize you. Now, I don't think we should wait for a massive trade agreement. I think that takes too long to negotiate. We have professional negotiators that could stretch this out for 15 or 20 years. But I think the governments come together. Imagine a meeting of Modi and Biden together, along with a set of other leaders, and say that each country will give its incentives in its own way. Because after all, we are about the sovereignty of each country. That's what we share. So they come together. Some countries will focus on subsidies. Some will focus on regulatory changes. Some will do tax incentives. Some will do a combination of that. But each in its own way will subsidize it. And over time, the market will find that some countries specialize in certain areas. And they develop a competency, and other countries specialize in different areas. And over time, you'll develop the supply chains you need. So that's my modest proposal.
And I think those recommendations are very, very in line with what countries like India are thinking. So, Jeb, you are spot on that. Let me tell you that. But if I ask you a more pointed question, we are here at Raisina 2022. I think the trigger was to rethink a lot of this was probably COVID and the disruptions we saw during COVID and the dependence we saw both on the digital side and also on the medical side, on the healthcare side, especially the APIs for a lot of critical medicines. What is that is your, in your opinion, apart from the facts, the incentives and the cooperation, some of the other things in terms of capability building standards that you want India and Indian leadership to think about?
Well, I think first
while we are doing this very tough balancing act.
Yeah, we're not going to all have exactly the same standards. We're going to have different interpretations of certain values. I think in the very technical areas, that's really where it's very important to focus, because you cannot run a common open platform if you have very different technical standards. But in terms of things like, let's say, environmental laws or labor laws, there are going to be some differences and different focuses. Some countries will be more focused on green and others less so. I don't think we should let that stop the development of supply chains. I think we should let that iron itself out over time.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I want to, I think, Jeb, in conclusion, in the last few minutes that we have in this exciting fireside chat, what would be the low-hanging fruit in terms of which supply chains, and I don't want to put you on a spot, but what is those low-hanging fruit, which are a combination of what countries can move fast, number one, and two, what is immediately required for our societal development or for innovation? What do you think are those few, areas that first India and other countries should concentrate on?
Well, I know what the U.S. should focus on. The U.S. has to focus on bringing more production capacity in semiconductors. That's an imperative. U.S. is down to around 12% of global production. It needs to be higher. I would say something that we would look to India for, mineral processing. And to do so not with yesterday's technologies, but
absolutely
with tomorrow's technologies. There are new ways of processing minerals, cleaner ways of doing so. This is an area that India could be a leader in, something that's growing immensely. Because there are a lot of companies that can assemble battery cells and make battery packs. The fact is, among the democratic friends and allies, very few of them can process minerals.
So that's interesting. You talk about number one is chips, which is, I think, the world recognizes it, but also minerals. I think if I may add in the final few moments is that I think we also need to work on independent payment systems, creating more robust payment systems, interoperable identity platforms, skilling platforms. This will go a long way in building trust as well as showing the capability that we have apart from many other areas. What we are seeing is that three things are becoming even more critical as this Ukraine-Russia crisis is going on: identity, money, which is banks and financial systems, and skills as we go forward. And I think those are the areas, apart from the ones that you mentioned, that I think countries should come together to solve for, and really not only solve for themselves, but also offer it to others.
Yes.
With that, I think we have had a very exciting round of Fireside Chat here at the Raisina Dialogues 2022. Thank you, ORF, and all the young team of organizers that have helped us get this done. Thank you.